Okay, so today, last 30 minutes of class is going to be the midterm. We're going to be talking about Keats today, also Tennyson, but not for very long. Critical analysis is due on Sunday. I'll probably be grading a whole lot in the afternoon, maybe in the evening time, and I'll probably still stick to the discussion post so that we're aware of that. I want to make you aware, Conrad's Heart of Darkness is a short novel. Short novel. Like if it were like in a real book, like that you would have separate, it would be about 110 to 150 pages. In the book, I think it's only like 70 or so pages or 60. But I will say about it that it generally generates a lot of people's research paper topics. There are a number of different things to write about in that particular one, assuming that you don't just straight up write about the exact same racism that's happening in the book. But remember that critical analysis, because that's happening on Sunday, 2 days later the planning is due. So that's something to prepare for. My suggestion, of course, is since the planning is due Tuesday, go ahead and read the Yeats poems because they might give you something to write about as well. Those are short poems right there, relatively, the Yeats poems, but then James Joyce's The Dead is a short story that runs about 20 pages. So this is a weird semester in that all the short poems are in the beginning, but they get longer as we go. James Joyce's The Dead is a short story, and then The Wasteland is the longest poem and the hardest poem you'll ever read in your life. And that happens just before the research paper is due. That you'll be reading The Wasteland while you're writing your research paper. It's unavoidable, I'm sorry. It's hard. And then we're a lot closer to the end of the semester when research paper is due than we were last semester. So when the research paper is due August 4th, the very last day of class is August 14th. So there's only 10 days from the day that the paper is supposed to be turned in till the very last day of class. Huh? Yeah, so I'm just like warning you, like you're not gonna have like 2 weeks to prepare this thing this time, like maybe you took last time. So keep that in mind. And let me see, was there anything else I need to mention about the readings? I think that I covered basically everything you need to know from here on out. Information sheets, I think I got all those graded by the people who got those forms turned in, so those are done too. I think that's about it. I think now we can get to Keats. So we're going to do probably the one that people talked about the most, When I Have Fears That I May Cease to Be, first. Do we have one on Bartleby? Because I like the Bartleby website. Let's see if that's there. Yes. They have good formatting on this website. I like it. Good formatting because it's spare. You know what spare means? Doesn't do a whole lot. Yeah. All right, so When I Have Fears That I May Cease to Be. Y'all didn't write a whole lot about what I consider to be the common misconception about this poem, which is that it's purely about... I think it's very possible that actual love between him and another person doesn't even truly pop up in the poem at all. The only thing we can truly verify is happening is he's worried that he's going to run out of time to write all the things he wants to write. That's the only thing we can truly say is happening, because who the love is may not be a who at all. It might be the work he's writing, and so he might be considering especially the topic of it, or not the topic, but the type of writing it is. Anyways, let me get to it and then we'll make sense of that. I don't suggest, no offense Cody, reading it like Cody said he did, which is reading every other line as its own poem. Yes. Like the 2nd, the 4th, the 6th, the 8th, and the 10th, and the 11th, the 12th, and the 14th all went together as one poem, and then the other ones went together as their own poem, the alternating lines. I tried doing that and I was like, what? Like I saw nothing there. But if you did, if you read Cody's, like, that's the secret, and then you read it back and you were like, what? Then I felt the same way. So no offense, Cody.
It helped me.
If it helped you, then it helped. So he says, when I have fears that I may cease to be, before my pen has gleaned my teeming brain. And I think that just essentially means, like, I fear that I will stop existing before my pen has had a chance to take all the ideas out of my head. Because I am full of ideas. And he obviously was, because he wrote a whole lot of poetry by the age of 26. Read a lot of Greek. Says, before high-piled books and charactery. And that doesn't mean what you would think, like, it's two things. One is Huh?
It's like the letters.
Yeah, it is the letters. It's also the characters. So when it says in character, he said like the high-piled books written with characters, like writing characters, also characters that he's created that go in these things. And so it's a long, complicated sentence because it says, when I have fears that I may cease to be before, my pen is going to make to me, before piled books. So this is another before. It's like an additional before to the last before. So when I have fears that I may cease to be before high-piled books in character, hold like rich garners the full ripened grain. Meaning that before the books that he's written hold the fully ripened grain that was in his head, written down his thoughts. He's just really good at metaphors and symbolism and images that match what he's trying to talk about. So he's like, if he says, so it starts off with a when. So we've got the when, and then he tells us what happens eventually. Because he says, when I have fears that I may be in the situation where I haven't had a chance to write everything that I could have written, or have books that hold all of my ideas fully ripened and ready to go. He says, when I behold upon the night's starred face, so he looks up at the stars, huge cloudy symbols of a high romance. And that means he's in the current process of writing a romance called Endymion. So when he talks about this high romance he's writing, he's talking about an artistic romance written in poetic form with heroes and saving people and stuff like that. So it might sound like he's talking about a person he's having a romantic relationship with, because that's how we see it. But romance started to mean something a little different in the times of, or it already meant something different back then, but then it's also, we're going through romanticism. So romance doesn't always mean someone you're in love with. So huge cloudy symbols of a high romance. So he starts to see in the stars these cloudy symbols, almost like he's talking about astrological signs. Like there are actual shapes up there in the stars that he can see. And when he has those fears, he might cease to be and feel that he may never live to trace the shadows of those shapes. So like there are full shapes up there in the skies, and he may not even ever live to trace their shadows. Like, like you see, like, what is it, like Microsoft Word has like the font settings, it's like you can have like the font, the border of the font, and that's how they usually make the impact font for memes. But sometimes you see somebody get a little too fancy with the memes, and the fonts themselves have like a shadow drop behind them. It's like a little shadow drop. So he's saying, I wouldn't even live to trace the shadows of these beautiful things. And of course, there's a lot of detail to letters, and he's talking about just the shape of it behind, with no coloring, no anything, no full shape. So he's afraid that all these great ideas he has in detail that he sees in the sky, he'll never have a chance to write down even close to the detail of it. Almost like Coleridge wrote about Kubla Khan, if I actually believed he really had that dream. So he says, and when I feel, fair creature of an hour, that I shall never look upon thee more, never have relish in the fairy power of unreflecting love, then on the shore of the wide world I stand alone, and think till love and fame to nothingness do sink. And I wonder if he's actually talking about a person here. A lot of people say, okay, it's a person. But I wonder what happens to the book he's talking about. He could be writing to his writing itself. The love might not be an actual person. It very well could be. But the one thing we do know is happening here is that he's worried that he might not be able to write all the things that he has in his head that he thinks he can write. And he's probably right about that, because he died at 26. So it wasn't like an unfounded fear. Fair creature of an hour. That makes me think, like, because it's a semicolon, right? It's not a period. He's not moving on to a new idea. It's the same idea. So when he feels fair creature of an hour, so this could be Endymion, the thing he's writing, that I won't ever look upon thee more, that I'll never have relish in the fairy power of unreflecting love. Because it's true, like when you write something, it doesn't love you back. You just love it. And it exists in the way that it is. And why would he want the fairy power of unreflecting love? Like it's like his writing has seduced him. Why would you want somebody that, like La Belle Dame Sans Merci, literally he just got seduced? Like, man, I can't wait for that unreflecting love. There's nothing quite like unrequited love. Can't wait to have myself a relationship where someone doesn't love me back. That's what I'm missing. That's why it doesn't make any sense that he's talking about an actual person here. The only time that would ever make sense where you'd want to love something that doesn't love you back is, say, like a child. Because that's just like, you have a child and sometimes they hate you. It just happens. But usually it has something to do with you. If that's the case. I mean, it's like I just kept telling them to do stuff for me. Get me a beer out of the fridge and they started to hate me. Weird how that is. Tell you one of the biggest ways to tip for the future. One of the biggest ways to make your kids hate you whenever you have children is the phrase, do what I say, not what I do. Kids can't do that. Kids look to you as an example and you're like, you need to do the things I tell you to do, not the things that I have done. So that's why I think it really isn't a person here. I think he's talking to his work of art that he's creating, because that's something that doesn't love you back, but which you nonetheless love. It can't love because it just is the expression of your feelings put out. And he says, then of the wide world I stand alone and think, till love and fame to nothingness do sink. The love that he has for his art, the fame that he hopes to gain by it, they become nothing in the fears of dying before you're able to get it all done. Ugh. It's just sad. I wonder what would have happened if he'd made it to the age of midlife crisis. Actually, I don't even know if they had midlife crises back then, did they? I mean, what are they gonna do? Can't buy a BMW. And it's like, I bought a Palomino.
Bought a new carriage.
A nice horse, yeah, a new carriage. Oh gosh. I bought me a bodice. Splurged a bit. So does that make sense? Anybody have any one of the things you want to add? Yes.
Honestly, when I first read over this, I didn't really, I guess, wasn't in the right frame of mind. So I literally thought he was scared to write a fantasy or something. Because all the words you kept hearing fantasy, fairies, different things like that.
Well, it kind of is like that because fantasy and high literature weren't really separated at that time. So fantasy, I mean, there were literally magic things happening. Like Sir Gawain would be a kind of thing that he might want to write. But I mean, like green dudes that pop up and all the magical things that happen in there. Those aren't real, but they are still considered high art, weirdly enough. So yeah, I'd say fantasy fully fits. He's worrying about fantasy. Okay. I thought of something funny. Okay. That brings me right into La Belle Dame sans Merci. That's actually not how you say that, in case anybody was wondering. La Belle Dame sans Merci. Okay, so there's a couple of things I didn't mention about this. This might help, though. Because I noticed at least one person expressed confusion about this. The first three stanzas are like the speaker of the poem talking to the knight, and the rest of the poem is the knight replying to the speaker. There is no dialogue marks or anything, so it doesn't indicate to you that there are two different people speaking at any point. It's just sort of, I guess, in the context of it when you see, it sounds like a question than an answer. It just sort of moves that way, and he doesn't provide more than that. This is the one I have a story that I like to tell.
Does the knight die?
Huh?
Does the knight die?
I mean, maybe eventually. Not within the context of the poem, no. He says, "Oh, what can ail thee, knight-at-arms, alone and palely loitering? The sedge has withered from the lake, and no birds sing. Oh, what can ail thee, knight-at-arms, so haggard and so woebegone? The squirrel's granary is full, and the harvest done." So he's basically setting up what time of the year it is. He says, I mean, what are you doing outside waiting? It's starting to get cold out. I mean, we filled up the granaries, so we have, seed and grain for the winter. But you're still out here. What for? It's so funny. People used to live back then like this. But every time we see a zombie movie, zombie apocalypse, people are scrounging for canned goods. People used to just farm. I always think that's funny. They're like, my gosh, what would we do? Because we don't know any to do anything anymore. We Google everything. We YouTube it. Like, how to screw in a screw. YouTube. It says, do you have a Phillips or a flathead? You're like, screw YouTube. I don't even, what does that even mean? Where am I? So like, the people used to just do that. They would be like, well, winter's coming, better put a whole bunch of grains in a big old silo so we have lots of food to eat. Just crazy to me that they had to think that far in advance just to live. I see a lily on thy brow with anguish moist and fever dew, and on thy cheeks a fading rose fast withereth too. So it seems as though he's been excited about some love situation. He's like, but he's also sad. And he basically asks, so what's your story, Mr. Knight? And the knight says, I met a lady in the meads, full beautiful, a fairy's child. Her hair was long, her foot was light, and her eyes were wild. He is speaking about her in sort of, I guess, a mythical way. It sounds mystical, like she must have been the child of a fairy. She had long hair, light feet, wild eyes. I don't know. It sounds to me like almost like a cartoon character, like basically every female character in every anime my daughter watches, where they have like almost no personality. It's just like this force, like a force of kindness or a force of that kind of thing. He says, I made a garland for her head and bracelets too in fragrant zone. She looked at me as she did love and made sweet moan. And I don't necessarily think that that's meant to be a sexual type of moan. I mean, I think that it's implied that they do probably do that. But as she loved him, I assumed like through some kisses or something, and like she was like, "Oh, I love thee, night." That kind of like moan, like not like a moan. And I know that sounds weird because it seems like I always like all the poems. I'm like, you didn't know it, but this is a sex poem. Like this one, I'm like, let's dial back. It's a little more romantic sounding for the night, I think. He says, I set her on my pacing steed, and nothing else saw all day long, for sidelong would she bend and sing a fairy's song. So he's kind of established her as like this magical creature here, I think. And she was just so amazing. She must have been magical. And he's like, I rode with her on my horse, like through the countryside. So they went on like an adventure. She found me roots of relish sweet and honey wild and manna dew, and sure in language strange she said, I love thee true. Or in language strange. She could have said anything. She could have been like, Aloof did you? And he'd be like, I don't know what. That must be I love you, right? Because he says in language strange. How would he even know? I think of it a lot like, I don't know, falling in love with, say, a foreigner that you don't even know the English. Like they don't know English and you don't know their language, and like, but it sounds like y'all seem to be like in a romantic state. Like it almost like that. Like you don't know what she's saying. She could look at his eyes and be like, how do you do? And then it'd be like, you have something on your nose. And then she like goes like that, and you're like, oh, she loves me. She touched my nose, but it's just her wiping something. You never know. And anybody know what manna dew has like? No. Like manna. Has anybody heard of manna before? Like what manna is?
Yeah.
Man, I think in the Bible that it was like the bread that God gave down to the Israelites when they were escaping Egypt.
Yeah, it's really, I always thought it made it sound like because it came from God, like it must have tasted good, but also like it kept the body healthy.
Yeah.
So I think of it a lot like a tasty limbus bread from Lord of the Rings. You know, they eat like a crumb of that stuff, and they have all the sustenance they need. So it's like a magical, like almost God-given, magic-given food. I don't know what sweet relish was to them, but she took me to her elfin grot, and there she wept and sighed full sore. It's supposed to be sighed full sore. That's actually incorrect. And there she wept and sighed full sore, and there I shut her wild, wild eyes with kisses four. So he like, I guess, her eye, like he kissed her eyes 4 times, twice for one and twice for the other. Like I don't know. I guess it's supposed to be a sweet act. I don't think they're doing angel kisses. Is that what they're calling?
I don't remember exactly.
Angel.
I never knew people kissed each other's eyeballs. So.
No, they're closed. You silly. And so it says elfin grot, so it's like her little elfin home, and like says there she wept and sighed full sore, and I shut her eyes with kisses for. To me, that sounds like two people who haven't made love yet. To me, like they're having this romantic love. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking this, but I feel like that to me, that sweetness of that moment tells me that they haven't made love yet. And I don't see why they would meet, make love, then they have all these romantic moments later. Maybe that's how it works. I don't know, these types of situations. And he said, and there she lulled me asleep, and there I dreamed, woe betide, the latest, or like the last dream I ever dreamed on the cold hillside. And he says, while I was asleep, after she lulled me asleep, and says, I saw pale kings and princes too, pale warriors, death pale were they all. They cried, La belle dame sans merci hath thee enthralled. So basically, she's gotcha. And it said La belle dame sans merci, and I don't know why they translate it weirdly sometimes, but I think this works. They say like the belle dame sans merci is the beautiful woman without pity, but I think the beautiful woman without mercy sounds even better, because like she knows full well what she's doing and has no mercy upon him. She just captures his heart and then leaves. So she has you in her service. Kind of has you it's like sort of like a hypnotized, but sort of like just in service. He says, I saw their starved lips in the gloam with horrid warning gaped wide, and I awoke and found me here on the cold hillside. So he falls asleep, she's there, she like nudges him to sleep, and then he has this dream and he wakes up and he's like, what? And she's gone. And he says, and this is why I sojourn here alone and palely loitering, though the sedge is withered from the lake and no birds sing. So there's not really a reason for it. Like, it's kind of like a shorter Rime of the Ancient Mariner or something, where we don't really know why the girl would do this. Like, why she would seduce the dude and then just leave him. We don't really know the reason. But I guess there's some people who, and maybe it's just the magicness of it. I mean, think about like Rime of the Ancient Mariner, when these two like demon, angel, godlike characters show up and start arguing over his soul. They don't really care much about humans. They don't think that they're that. Bless you. So, there's no real reason knowing like why. I think of it often like, because the thing I have probably done the most that relates to like uncaring gods is play Skyrim and Oblivion, and there were always these gods in the stories that they didn't really care about people. They had personalities and like lots of power, basically. It was more like the Greek gods, where they just did what they did, and the fact that people were there was sort of non-consequential for them. They just did whatever they wanted to do. But this story, or this poem, I've always had a story that I like to tell along with it. I don't know if y'all really have situations like this that you've seen pop up with like people who become sort of, they become attached to an idea and then can't pull themselves away from it. Like, it's a real thing though. He sort of gets seduced by the idea of something, and the idea of it is so nice that he can never rationally get himself back on track, I guess. And this makes it seem like magic did it, but I've seen this happen in real life, guys. Real life. I'll tell you a story about, I can't remember the guy's name anymore. I don't want to call him Kyle because it's just mean. I don't know, we'll just call him my friend. So back when I first started college, my parents did not want me to live in the dorms. They said, well, you can save money by living at home. I was so tired of living out in the country. It's like the worst. We didn't have like creeks and stuff and forests in their backyard. It was just like, we were just some grass. And it takes 15 minutes to drive to Walmart if you forget something. That was my life. And I was just like, I can't do that. I was like, I got to live in town so that if I forget something at Walmart, it's going to take me 10 minutes to get it. Round trip. And so I wanted to go stay in the dorms. And while I was in the dorms, I made some friends. I'd never been good at making friends with guys, but I had a small group of guy friends that we were all staying in the male dorms together. So, what are you supposed to do? You make friends with the dudes around you. So I was like, okay. It was working out. Our friendship was starting to move forward. Okay. So we were we'd sometimes we'd hang out and do stuff, mostly just like watch movies or play video games on the one console. I think one of my friends bought, it was like a PlayStation. And I don't know if y'all have like friend groups like this, but I think it was like 5 of us, and one of them was like the quiet guy. Like he never really said anything, but on occasion he'd say one thing that was hilarious, and we were like, yeah, this is why this guy's around. But he never said anything except for that once in a blue moon. And for whatever reason, one night, like we always did normal stuff, but one night, one of the guys or 2 of the guys, I can't remember, got it in their heads that we were going to go to a frat party because none of us had been. I was on the side of let's not do this. My experience with popular kids in school, or people who could afford to be popular, things worked differently back then. You bought popularity. Was like, it was not great.
More like clown now.
Cloud, they call it different. And like, so I didn't ever want to go to like I didn't want to get beat up, basically, which is weird for a 6'2" guy to say, but I mean nobody usually messes with me, but still, it was like I always felt like I was much smaller than all the other dudes with muscles, because I had none. I didn't really want to go, but we went. All 5 of us did. We went in there and we had I think we had to pay some fee to get in or something, and we'd have like X's on our hands because we were too young or something, or was it X's if you aren't? I can't remember. It's been so long. So we were at this party, and at this party we saw fairly early on, I guess the frat guys have money or they're attractive. I don't really know exactly what it is. Confidence. But some of the more attractive girls on campus, and they're, on a big campus like A&M Commerce, there's not a whole lot of people. The campus itself is not big, but a lot of people go there, like 7,000 people, I think, go there. Might even be up to like 12. It's a lot of people. And you see like a lot of people, you don't remember 2 of them. You maybe remember some of the people you go in class with because you don't know any of them. It's unlike here where you remember everybody. These are all brand new faces every single time you go to any class. And you're like, do I have any class with 2 people? And if you do, they become your instant best friend. And you're like, do you like to eat this? No. Do you like to watch this? No. Do you like to? We're in the same class. We're friends. It's just how it works when you get like, go off to college. Because you're like, I see your face twice a day. That makes you my friend. Which means you also become friends with like the cafeteria lady and like the people at the fast food place. I'm kidding about that one. So with this friend group, we went to this frat party, and one of the people that but she was at this party with one frat guy was walking around with her as a dude with big old muscles, and like it was the Delt House in Commerce. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that before, but tall Delta on his chest, and he's walking around like this with this girl, and he's leading her around, and she progressively over the course of the night gets drunker and drunker, despite the fact that she has an X on her hand. I think she must have friends. So she seems to be getting drunker and drunker as the night goes on, and he's like leading her around. It's the strangest thing, and she's just like got these solo cups. And at one point, and I remember this, we're all standing in a group, but I can't remember the guy's name. Let's just call him Steve. No, it's not his name. I don't know. Friend, quiet guy. Huh? Okay. Quiet guy was sitting. There was like these old couches. They were almost like burlap sacks they had in like the 60s and 70s, and they had one of these like in this weird sort of doorway. It was like a hall and like a room, and then between those 2 doors there was like this burlap couch. It was very scratchy to sit on. So me and most of the other friends were standing, whereas quiet guy was sitting on one end of this little burlap love seat. They had like weird colors like green and yellow and orange, like stripes. I was like, those don't go together at all. It's like Blanca the couch. Nobody understands a Street Fighter reference. Got it. It was like a Jamaican couch. Is that better? Like with the flag? Okay, a little better. Interestingly, the Jamaican flag is the only flag in the world to not have the colors blue, red, or white in it. Wait, I'm sorry, not white. Wait. Yes. I don't know. I can't remember. You look it up. Burden of proof is on you for some reason. So, because I've lost interest. So, I'm a terrible storyteller. So, what is happening is we're standing, guys leading drunk girl through, incredibly attractive drunk girl. We've been watching her all night. It's terrible we haven't. And then quiet guy on the couch. So at one point, she stops and turns to frat guy and says, and I'm exaggerating here a little bit, like in the voices I'm doing, but she says like, hey, I want to make out. And he's like, no, I don't want to make out right now. why don't you make out with him? And he points at quiet guy on the couch. No idea why he did this. I guess this is just what like powerful, confident guys do. They just say, I can make people do whatever I want them to do. I'll take attractive girl, point at this guy, and now she's gonna make out. So she points at him, and she goes, okay. And she goes and like, I thought she was gonna sit next to him, but no, she like goes and like sits in his lap. There's no room because he's sitting on one end of the couch, and the arm of the couch had these big old arms that like, so like he has to like scoot his legs aside to fit hers where they wanted to go. And like she sits in his lap, and he's like he's one of those guys too who had like, you know, like kind of like a fuzz stash. Like he couldn't grow a mustache, but bless him, he was trying. And he had like the little hairs like all over his face. Like he couldn't make anything grow, but he was trying. So he had all that like over, and like I was thinking like, man, what must she feel? Like I don't know. It was very strange for me to think that, but I thought I was like, what must that? Because I only kissed girls before, and like they don't have facial hair, so I was like, how strange must that be for her to feel sparse hair on a face? I don't know. It was a weird thought I had, but. So anyway, she's making out with him probably like, I don't know, a minute and a half, 2 minutes ish. And then like he like the frat guy like taps on her shoulder or something. I can't remember. He's like, come on, we gotta go. And then she stops and she says, thank you. I don't know why. It was weird. She says, thank you. And he goes, you're welcome. Like it was just the weird, like when it ended. And then like we all kind of just stood there like this. Like we didn't see it happening. Or like we were pretending like don't get excited or something. And then like she gets up and she walks off with his frat guy, and we all look at him like, what? He like stands up and like we're like patting him on the back. We're like, way to go, buddy. And I don't know if the other guys noticed this, but I noticed like the rest of the party, like he stands with us instead of sitting for some reason. I'd be like, maybe it happened again, just go sit. I don't know, but he just like felt like so triumphant he had to stand. But he stood there with us, and like I noticed like the whole rest of the night he kept following her. Like he'd look at her, like he wouldn't stop. It was like he'd look at her on occasion. But she was one of those like people so attractive. I didn't know who she was. I'd never been in a class with her. I only saw her in passing on campus, and I remembered who she was when we got to the party. She was that attractive. And we left the party later, and he kind of lagged behind as we were walking to the car. And I remember this, like this, he goes, guys, I think we had a moment back there. We were like, dude, no, you don't understand. This is like a unicorn, okay? This was like you saw a unicorn, and what you shouldn't do is be like, I think that me and I should get like a unicorn pet, and then we're gonna live together and we're gonna be happy ever after. It's not gonna happen like that. You got lucky one time. You know, this is like you won the lottery. You don't be like, oh, wow, I won the lottery. I can totally do this every day, and then go play the lottery but expect to win. It doesn't work like that. It's like you got lucky one time. That's it. So you don't try to pursue this. I mean, she's not like the girl for you. She was drunk. We're trying to say all the things that like we could say to explain to him that this was not a permanent relationship. And he eventually like agreed, and he got in the car. But we started noticing that like when we asked him to come around, like, you know, like, hey, you want to hang out? Sometimes he'd say no, and then we'd say, you want to hang out? He'd come, but he'd always find a way to steer the conversation back to her. He'd be like, hey, guess who I saw today? We'd be like, oh, I don't know, who did you see? We already knew. He was like, I saw her walking. Like, I think like she kind of nodded at me when we passed, because I think she remembers. Like, she's not remember that you even exist. Like, we're trying to say it in the nicest way possible. But then eventually like, he stopped coming around at all, and we never heard from him again. Like, I think he probably to this day lives in like his basement and like just has added her on a friend on Facebook, and then just reads her whole feed, like sees like, you know, what's her husband up to, like doing, like she's got 3 kids, she's happy. Because you know she's living in a really nice house. Because what was it I told my wife last night? I came with a quote. I said it was like we saw something on. I saw some meme. And I said this phrase to her. I said, because if you're cute, you can have everything you want in life. It's sad, but it's kind of true. As long as you're not a horrible person. And even sometimes that works. It's the weirdest thing. But yeah, it seemed like his obsession with that girl after that one moment broke him for the rest of his life. I mean, maybe he's doing fine now. I don't know. But I can't remember the guy's name, and I haven't seen him pop on my Facebook feeds. I recognize his face. It's just the saddest thing. And I feel every time I read this poem about this knight, I'm like, that's the real world equivalent. He became so attracted to the idea of her that he could not let go of it. What?
Are you the quiet guy?
No, I'm not the quiet guy. If I were the quiet guy, I got the girl eventually. Because my wife is pretty daggum good looking. What now?
One night stand doesn't mean a trick.
This wasn't even a one night stand. This is like a 2-minute kiss. This is like a, what do you call it? Like a 2-minute kiss. There's really no right, make out. 120-second make out. How many ways can I phrase this? A 7,200 second. Is that how many seconds are in 2 minutes? That's ridiculous. I already said 120 seconds. I don't know why I'm trying to. I was thinking like how many minutes are in an hour or some stupid thing. That was dumb. It's actually 3,600 seconds in an hour, right? Or is it 36,000? I don't know. It's math. So, that is the sad story of my friend from college. No. All the roles were played by me, directed by me, edited by me. Bad editing. It needs better editing. I literally didn't edit it at all. It's very hard for me to edit when I'm speaking out loud. What did you say? Nightingale. You're right. Nightingale.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that one.
Which, by the way, Bethany, is a bird.
Is what?
You were right. Good call. See, I was hoping to mention that then, but you waited until you did it too early. Oh gosh, look at all this crap. My gosh. Okay. So this one is, I think, probably of the poems of Keats, I think this is the most difficult one to understand. Because I think that he sets up an idea in the beginning and then just sort of gives detail about it. It's one of the reasons I removed a poem called To Autumn from our reading lists, because that one is literally just imagery of autumn. I mean, there's almost no more to it than just the imagery that we see in autumn. Lots of browns and reds and oranges and fruits that have become overripe, fields of wheat that are, golden. And that's about all that there is to it. Now this, he's sort of talking about those sorts of things, but kind of to a purpose. I think it's important first for us to see what a nightingale's song sounds like. Crap, did I remember to get that pulled up? Oh, it's right there. Let's see, is this the one? Yes.
It's here.
So you have to see the video for it to really, I think. That's really loud. Let's see. And the way his mouth looks when he does it is very strange. I'm sorry, beak. You don't really call it a mouth, do you?
I can't believe that we're at
I found that shocking when I saw it, because I'd always assumed that when we hear sounds like that out in the woods, that it's multiple birds. It's the same bird just doing like variations on a theme where it's like and like it's weird. That was Nichols' version of the song, which is terrible. But I don't know, he sounds like he's pissed that I stopped him. Like, why'd you stop? But so to me, like, when I heard Nightingale's song, I'm thinking, he's listening to a nightingale and he's hearing, or like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what a nightingale sounds like. So I looked this up and I was like, oh, geez. Like, to me, it's almost like a mechanical thing. Like, you notice how, like, he's like, but I guess they hear it more than they actually see it. Because like to a skylark, he's talking about the bird that's like very, very high up. So this bird's actually in a tree. He can see. But they didn't have technology like this where they could zoom in on it and get like a nice shot. Like leave a tripod pointing at a nice perchy branch and be like, man, I hope a bird stops here eventually. This guy's probably filming for like what, 3 hours, hoping to get like a couple seconds of this bird singing, and eventually goes and he flies away. Huh? His 2 minutes. It was a good 52 seconds of beautiful sound. What is this yellow bar doing? Hey, I'm over here. What? I'm over there. Like, oh, it's very strange. Y'all can't see it, can you?
Yeah.
No, you can. Okay. It's like the DVD screen in the office. So that is the Nightingale. That is German for the nightingale. It's not really. So we're going to talk about. He hears this song, and actually the story behind this is that he was sitting underneath a tree outside of his friend's house, Charlie Brown. It's not exact his real friend's name. It's actually, I think, where the name Charlie Brown came from is his friend. It's not that tree. No, it's I don't know exactly what the tree was. I can't remember. I had to get out the textbook to see. But he's sitting down there and he's writing some stuff down. He says like for maybe like an hour or two, like Keats is out there writing some stuff down and Charlie Brown sees him. And then he comes back in and like takes some stuff in his hand and like shoves it behind a bookcase or something. And like Charlie Brown comes and like pulls these papers out and it's this poem. Like he just shoves some scraps like into a bookcase.
Imagine, like, you're saying Charlie Brown and I'm actually envisioning
Yeah.
the cartoons.
Probably shouldn't. I doubt he really looks like that. I should just call him Chuck. Yeah, his friend Chuck.
Chuck Norris.
Chuck is like what Charlie Brown's called now. So he like kind of just wrote this down like an hour or so and then shoved it like in a bookcase, and that's what we have here. Is he was literally outside listening to a nightingale. And I think that once you get the beginning of it, I think that the rest of it sort of makes more sense. You just have to spend some time at the beginning to make sense of it. But he says, "My heart aches, and a drowsy numbness pains my sense, as though of hemlock I had drunk." So it's like a strong kind of poison / drug. Or emptied some dull opiate to the drains 1 minute past. And leftwards his sunk. So he's like, my heart aches as though I just got like exceedingly drunk or high off of some drug that's stronger even than alcohol or something. Like, there's something more ethereal to it. There's something more almost magical quality to the drunkenness. I mean, I've never been on opiates before. I mean, they put me on Tylenol 4, I think, or Tylenol 3 or whatever for dental pain. But it was very managed, stuff. I've never been on like opium, which is I think what they would put people on back then. So they'd be like, woo, like So I think that's what he's thinking of. He says, "'Tis not through envy of thy happy lot that my heart aches, but being too happy in thine happiness, that thou, light-winged dryad of the trees, in some melodious plot of beech and green and shadows numberless, singest of summer in full-throated ease." So it's like Keats's version of Shelley's Skylark poem. And I really don't know who wrote what first or if they'd read each other's before they decided to write it, but there was a history of poets writing about, the songs of birds and writing poems to birds themselves. So he says, "My heart aches, but because I am too happy in your happiness." He says that your song sounds so happy that it makes me so happy that you feel so happy that my heart aches. I think maybe the equivalent is, this is the best equivalent I can think of, and it's not a 1-to-1 ratio, okay? Has anybody seen the movie Coco?
Yes.
I still think it's the best Disney film. I've watched a number of Disney films with a daughter. Moana was #1 for a while. Then I saw Coco, and I watched Coco a few more times, and I went, no, I cry way more in Coco than Moana. A little bit in Moana.
Every time that grandmother scene happens, I cry every time.
It's kind of like, I'm so happy for Miguel that he, spoiler alert for Coco, that he is able to obtain the photo of his great-grandfather? Is that right? Because there's his mom, Grandma Elena, Great grandma Coco, great grandma Imelda. Yeah. So great grandpa Hector. Not Hector Salamanca. That's from something else. That's from Breaking Bad. But oh no, I am out of hemlock. My hemlock. Am I able to put a single thought together? Like I'm just. All right. So he says. And so to me, it's like with that moment when I watch Coco and I feel so happy for Miguel and Imelda and Hector all at once that he's both gotten a photo of Hector so he can put it on the ofrenda, and she's like, yeah, and I got this book and like poems he wrote me and stories, and let me tell y'all all a story. Because earlier in the film, it's mentioned that unless your family, he says like, I can go and I can put this guy's photo up on the ofrenda and he can come back. And he says, no, these people have to have known you in life and tell stories about you for it to count. And that's at least that's the mythology in the film. And so I was like, oh, so that's why. So like, I always wondered like, what would be the goal? Like if he gets Hector's real photo back and he gets it on the ofrenda, but he doesn't have actual stories to tell about Hector, he would still have to get Mama Coco to wake up and tell some stories about Hector, because if he didn't, then Hector would end up, it dying the final death. So like in that moment when I always feel so happy for freaking Miguel, or shoot, no, the moment when I feel so happy for Hector, actually that's when I cry the most, is when they start singing that Mi Corazon song, like and then Hector gets to stand there with Coco, and I'm just like crying, like a big, like ridiculous tears. Like I feel so happy for Hector in that moment that he's finally able to reconnect with his daughter, even though it sort of is odd that like she's there as an old woman and he's younger than her. That has always kind of thrown me off a little bit. It's accurate.
He was killed, remember?
Huh? Yeah, he was killed at a young age, and she lived to an old age.
Yeah.
So it's his daughter, which he's happy to see, but she's not. I'm gonna be honest. It's not the same little girl that he once had. It's not like, oh, come here, little. I thought I would get to see her once again, but like she's old. I'm gonna cry now just talking about it. I'm so happy for Hector in that moment. Like I just cry from the beginning of that song all the way to the end. In fact, I cry usually when he starts playing the guitar. Remember me, and then she starts singing.
That's when I start crying.
Yeah, I cried all the way to the end. So I'm so happy for Hector in that moment. That's what I think he's talking about the nightingale here, is he can tell the nightingale's happy, and he's so, and that's with a full story I have to feel so happy, right? He's able to do it just by hearing this bird sound happy. He's like, I'm just so happy for you, bird, that you're so happy. And now that's a huge emotional connection, I think, that he probably has so many emotional connections, it's hard to make even sense of it. Because I don't think I could do that. I'd be like, wow, what a pretty bird song. Like, I would never be able to, without some intricate story written by people. So, in that, now that we know that he's just very happy for this bird and how happy it is, and so that makes him happy, almost to the point of drunkenness, he says, oh, for a draught of vintage, wine. He says that hath been cooled a long age in the deep delved earth. So literally back then they would have, you've heard of wine cellars before? The reason you have wine cellars is kind of pointless these days. Because we have, machines that can chill wine to a specific temperature. They have wine chillers you can buy in the store. The reason they used to have wine cellars is because wine was best when chilled. However, you couldn't get wine chill up on the surface. What you had to do was dig a cellar and have it be deep. Because I don't know if you know this, but about 5 foot down, I think, the Earth is it is a constant 65-degree temperature. And there's actually heating systems and cooling systems for homes that the way that they work is they dig a huge tunnel straight down about 100 feet. They pipe air down into that tunnel and then back up, and all it does is pipe air in and out of there, and it's just constant 65-degree air pumping into the house. As long as they pump enough, the air stays a decent temperature. They do that for areas, though, where it's like the heat is not so overbearing that you couldn't deal with it. And that's why homes up north have basements. It's actually not to, and it's to keep the home warm, because the warm air rises in the winter from the ground, which it's all really weird but that's how they used to keep wine cool and at a constant temperature. So he says cooled a long age in the deep delver. So it's old wine. That means it's going to be tasting better. Tasting of flora and the country green dance and provincial song and sunburnt mirth. He's really good with words. Sunburnt mirth. Sunburnt happiness. Like summertime. You have your hand raised? I thought I missed a hand a while ago. I might be wrong. No? Okay. He says, oh, for a beaker full of the warm south, full of the true, the blushful hippocrene with beaded bubbles winking at the brim and purple-stained mouth. He's really good at like talking about like wine and making it feel like a visceral like thing you can touch. I don't know. He's just grape juice for you guys. Think of like the I don't know, like the richest grape juice you've ever had. Like Welch's concentrate without even adding any water, you know. Whoa. Talking about that what do you call it? What?
How would you know we're
Wine. Well, I mean, if you go to a Catholic church, you'd find out pretty quick that wine is gross as long as you took the sacrament, right?
Yeah.
I enjoy wine.
They don't use the good wine either at the Catholic Church, I don't think. They buy like the cheap wine.
Every Sunday, so they're like,
They buy like probably in bulk if they're anything like my church, where as long as it fits the description in the Bible, let's buy it cheap. And so you get like the driest crackers and like the cheapest grape juice. We've honored Jesus.
wait,
Yeah, makes no sense to me. Wouldn't you buy the most expensive? Anyways, what? It's different at Church of Christ. We like crackers and nobody puts it on our tongue. Nobody has us drink from this big glass that everybody drinks out of.
One time I remember they yelled at us because they said, because you couldn't either do it by hand or like mouth, and they're like, it's not as effective if you do it by hand, not by mouth.
You're closer to the Pope if you have the priest do it directly for you.
Oh.
Otherwise, it's a step removed.
Wait,
I don't know. Maybe that's my guess. I don't
My
know.
church, they like let other people do it too.
Hmm.
So like, they have
It's a pretty progressive Catholic church.
they have the priest on here,
Yeah.
and then like another person here, and then on the sides they have 2 more people, and on the other sides they have 2 more people doing it.
What happens if somebody demands that the Pope do it? So like, I must be as close to Jesus as possible. Be like, no. They'd be like, in fact, just suggesting that we're gonna shoot you, because that's what makes you deserve the audience of the Pope. Where are we going? I don't know where we're going. We gotta get back because we're about 20 minutes away from needing to do this exam. So he says, fade far away, dissolve, and quite forget what thou among the leaves hast never known. So he's talking about the bird here is singing of happiness. And he's like, I want to drink so that I can get rid of the sadness, so I can be as happy as you. The weariness, the fever, and the fret here, where men sit and hear each other groan, where palsy shakes a few sad last gray hairs, where youth grows pale and spectre thin and dies, where but to think is to be full of sorrow and laden-eyed despairs, where beauty cannot keep her lustrous eyes, or new love pineth in beyond tomorrow, where basically just existence itself is sad. That's what he says the earth is. And he says, away, away, for I will fly to thee. Not charioted, but so he's like abandoning this idea of the wine. He says, not charioted by Bacchus and his pards, but on the viewless wings of poesy. He says, though the dull brain perplexes and retards, already with thee, tender is the night, and haply the queen moon is on her throne, clustered round by all her starry phase, but here there is no light, save what from heaven is with the breezes blown through the verdurous glooms and winding mossy ways. It's really weird, like y'all haven't probably seen this, but when you fire up the VR, the Steam VR, there's like this starry landscape that's over you. There's no sun. It's just like this, what seems to be a desert landscape and stars above you and mountains in the distance. And that's how I think he thinks of like the area in which poetry is composed in the mind, because he's like, I'll go to you on the wings of poetry, and there's no light here save what from heaven is there. And in the other poem, he talks about how he sees the shapes of his future poem in the stars. And that to me almost says like he thinks of this one space in which poetry is composed as this sort of starry, beautiful landscape, almost like he's up in space on like an asteroid or something. And so he's talking about like I don't have to have wine, I can meet you on poetry, so I can just write poetry and it'll take me to you. And he says, I cannot see what flowers are at my feet, nor what soft incense hangs upon the boughs, but an embalmed darkness guess each sweet, wherewith the seasonable month endows the grass, the thickest, and the fruit tree wild. He's like, I can think of these times. I don't have to be there, I can think of them. White hawthorn, the pastoral eglantine, fast-fading violets covered up in leaves, and mid-May's eldest child, and coming musk rose, full of dewy wine, the murmurous haunt of flies on summer eves. So he's thinking, like, I can think of all these things in the poetic mind. And it says, darkling I listen, and for many a time I have been half in love with easeful death, called in soft names and many a mused rhyme to take into the air my quiet breath. and now more than ever seems it rich to die. To cease upon the midnight with no pain, while thou art pouring forth thy soul abroad in such an ecstasy. Somebody made reference to this in their discussion post, how he seems like he's saying because he's hearing this happy song, it's a nice time to die. Like if I'm going to die at any time, and I know I'm probably going to die soon, I might as well die now when I'm listening to your happy, happy song. Nobody wants to die at their saddest moment. You'd want to die at your happiest moment. Right at the end of it, you know. They're like, well, this is the last Avengers film that's ever going to be made, or the last Marvel film. Oh, no, no more ever? No more ever. End roll, credits. That's when you want to, you know, you're like, finally, I've seen it all. He said, still wouldst thou sing, and I have ears in vain, to thy high requiem become a sod. And he says, thou wast not born for death, immortal bird. What would you know of death? You sing only of happiness. No hungry generations tread thee down. He gets back to the what's on earth again. And he's so good at talking about this stuff. He says, the voice I hear this passing night was heard in ancient days by emperor and clown. This is the same Nightingale song that they've heard throughout history. It's been written about throughout history. Perhaps the self-same song that found a path through the sad heart of Ruth. This is the one from the Bible. When, sick for home, she stood in tears amid the alien corn. The same that oft times hath charmed magic easements, opening on the foam of perilous seas and fairylands forlorn. So he says all those times throughout history where a nightingale's been mentioned or where a nightingale could have been, like you've been, this has been the same song they've heard. And he says, he starts to kind of come out of it now. Forlorn, the very word is like a bell that told me back from thee to my soul self. Adieu. The fancy cannot cheat so well as she is famed to do, deceiving elf. Adieu, adieu. Thy plaintive anthem fades, past near the meadows, over the still stream, up the hillside, and now 'tis buried deep in the next valley glades. Was it a vision or a waking dream? Fled is that music. Do I wake or sleep? The nightingale flies away, and he's like, did this even happen? Is this real? I don't even know. And so it's weird sort of how he comes out of it. He doesn't even like find a definitive ending. He just sort of is like, this might not even happen. It's a very weird way to end that poem, but I don't know. I think very appropriate. So we got to move on to the next one. Ode to a Grecian urn. I think it's possible the textbook mentions that he once saw an urn. Is it in the footnotes somewhere? Or he saw like a Greek art display or something like that?
I think so, yeah.
Regardless, this is not a real urn. This does not exist in any country. He's writing about an urn that he's imagined completely in his mind, that he's describing to us, but which nonetheless does not exist anywhere. So he's creating all these landscapes. And I think you basically can understand the vast majority of the poem if you understand one thing, and that's that the Grecian urn in his mind is something that's been around for a long time, since the times of antiquity, since Homer's The Odyssey and the Iliad were written. This has existed. So it's outlived all of us. However, it doesn't move at all. It's much like Mont Blanc for Shelley. That mountain sits there and it shows us what eternity is because it doesn't move. It is here and it will be here after we're dead. And he talks about this urn that has been made by human hands, but which does not move ever. He's like, we have the power to like come and like grasp and hold one another and hug. But these two people who are close to each other and are about to kiss on the pictures of this urn, they never will. This is their reality, is that they will be almost kissing for eternity. But that also means the person you're stuck looking at for the rest of eternity is forever young and beautiful and will never get old. So there are some trade-offs there. So he talks to the urn itself. He said, thou still unravished bride of quietness, thou foster child of silence and slow time, sylvan historian, who canst thus express a flowery tale more sweetly than our rhyme? What leaf-ringed legend haunts about thy shape of deities or mortals, or both, in Tempe or the dales of Arcady? What men or gods are these? What maidens loth? What mad pursuit? What struggle to escape? What pipes and timbrels? What wild ecstasy? So he's asking, what are these tales that are told on you? And that's when he just sort of gets into it. And he says, heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. Therefore ye soft pipes play on, not to the sensual ear, but more endeared pipe to the spirit ditties of no tone. And I'm a little confused about what exactly he means here. And he says heard melodies are sweet, so like when we hear a song, that's sweet. But unheard melodies are sweeter? I don't know if he's saying like we imagine our own song, or if there is no song and we hear it, or if the art itself that we're looking at, it's a melody of visualness. I don't really know. I've always thought this part is a little off, but he's definitely talking about how they're obviously playing instruments in the picture, but there's no song. We don't hear anything. It'd be one of those things like them old documentaries of like the urn was discovered in 720 BC or something. Why would it be discovered way back then? And they go over the picture of the dude playing some instrument, and it goes. So they're playing fake music in the background because they're showing a picture of an instrument. They do those sorts of weird things in documentaries on the History Channel. Back before the History Channel had like Pawn Stars and stupid stuff like that. Is that what they have? Pawn Stars on History Channel? Why? Fair youth, beneath the trees, thou canst not leave thy song, nor ever can those trees be bare. Bold lover, never, never canst thou kiss. Though winning near the goal, yet do not grieve. She cannot fade, though thou hast not thy bliss. Forever wilt thou love, and she be fair. So you'll forever be in love with each other. You'll forever look on this beautiful woman that you'll never get to kiss. But don't worry, because she's going to be beautiful forever, and you'll be in love with her forever, and you're stuck in this moment in time, and it's never going to stop. But he does talk about both the limitations and the joys of being frozen in time. Ah, happy, happy boughs that cannot shed your leaves, nor ever bid the spring adieu. It's forever spring on this urn. The trees will always have leaves. And happy melodist unwearied, forever piping songs forever new. More happy love, more happy, happy love. I love how he liked to repeat things. He always sounded so happy, even though he's so sad. Forever warm and still to be enjoyed, forever panting and forever young. All breathing human passion far above that leaves a heart high, sorrowful, and cloy, a burning forehead and a parching tongue. Everybody in love on this urn is still in love. So much happiness. How lovely. Marker in case it's not. Who are these coming to the sacrifice? To what green altar? O mysterious priest, leadst thou that heifer? Lowing at the skies. And all her silken flanks with garlands dressed. So, who are the people coming to the sacrifice? We don't know. We'll never know. What little town? But it doesn't matter because the cow's never going to be sacrificed. It's just on the way. And it says here, interestingly, what little town by river or seashore or mountain built with peaceful citadel is emptied of its folk this pious morn? And, little town, thy streets forevermore will silent be, and not a soul to tell why thou art desolate can ever return. So if somebody says, well, why is the town empty? Nobody can ever answer, because nobody's ever going to return to say where they've been. In fact, I thought how weird that the town technically doesn't have a purpose. We know what it's for in the real world. Towns hold people. But this urn, the town exists on there. It'll never actually hold people, so what is its actual purpose? Merely to show that it is empty? Which is really weird. I don't know. It's a purposeless house. And he says, O Attic shape, fair attitude, with breed of marble men and maidens o'erwrought, with forest branches and trodden weed, thou silent form, dost tease us out of thought as doth eternity, cold pastoral. I really feel like that phrase encapsulates sort of the irony of the whole poem. So a pastoral situation is something that's very like verdant. There are like a lot of poems that are considered pastoral. Robert Frost is considered a pastoral poet. He wrote about like fields and streams and like things growing and being alive and happy and farm-like life. But this is a pastoral situation. It's farm-like area, but cold. It will never move. It's stuck in its place. So it technically isn't anything that it claims to be. It's not warm. It's not happy. It just is this frozen state. So cold pastoral kind of hits at the irony of the poem. When old age shall this generation waste, thou shalt remain in midst of other woe than ours, a friend to man, to whom thou sayest. And there's a little disagreement here about whether or not this quote is actually supposed to stop here at beauty is truth, truth, beauty. And then the speaker says that's all you know on earth and all you need to know, or whether the whole quote is attributed to the urn. Nobody really knows because there's different editions that had it in different ways, and he changed his mind over time. I feel like the speaker is the one saying that is all you know on earth and all you need to know. And beauty is truth, truth, beauty is all the urn is saying, because the urn is cold and can't say much, so of course it would just say the same repeated phrase twice. Beauty is truth, truth, beauty. It can't say much. Why would it be telling us what's all we know on earth and all we need to know? But he's saying that's all ye, you urn, know on earth and all you need to know. You know that beauty is truth and truth is beauty, and you can't say any more or think any more, and that's all you know and that's all you need to know. So he's telling the urn that. Now, I'm probably not going to spend a whole lot of time on Ulysses, even though it's probably one of the best examples of a dramatic monologue that exists in poetry. By the way, whoever said Ulysses S. Grant, not possible. Ulysses S. Grant was like 13 when this was written. So he hadn't done anything yet. So it can't be about him. It's about Ulysses, which is the Roman name for Odysseus. Who was it who wrote? What?
I looked up the name of his son, which showed like Odysseus and stuff.
So I've heard people pronounce it two different ways. It's either Telemachus or Telemachus. I usually pronounce it Telemachus because that's how I've heard it pronounced the most. But yeah, the son's name. So Alfred Tennyson, he's basically, this is why I referenced the song I Ain't As Good As I Once Was. I basically could just read this real quick and not even have to stop very much because it's mainly known for like how great its lines are. And a bunch of old guys returning from a trip and they want to travel again. It actually reminds me a lot of Gulliver. Gulliver's Travels. Yeah, because remember he got back from his travels in that one place. He's like, wow, I saw these tiny people. It was crazy. Enough for a lifetime. I think I'm going to go out again. You know? Odysseus literally goes out with his men. He gets lost on the way back from the Trojan War. Cast off by, I think, Poseidon because he did something bad. They were on the way back and he poked Poseidon's kid's eye out, which was bad because the kid was a Cyclops. He was keeping him hostage, so I mean, what was he gonna do? But he, like an idiot, Odysseus goes, and you have been tricked by Odysseus. Why would you? He had to throw his name out there. And then Odysseus, the son who's blind now, told Poseidon, and then Poseidon sent him on this crazy goose chase, which eventually he does get back home. But you can imagine a guy who's been through that level of adventure for 10 years, seeing giants and cyclopses and having sirens, and then the lotus flowers where they all got drugged up on an island. They almost half of them didn't want to leave. All these crazy things are happening on this journey, and you'd think that after that, I mean, nothing quite lives up to that again. It's all right, finally I'm back home to my wife and kid. This is very boring. Guys, come on, let's go. And actually, I think in Odysseus or the Odyssey, all of his guys die except for him. I don't think anybody lives besides him. But in this, it's like he's talking to all the guys he went out with. So it's sort of taking some liberties with the stories as they existed. But it's Odysseus or Ulysses talking about how he's back home and, hey, we should go out again. Because he doesn't want to just grow old here and die. He says, it little profits that an idle king by this still hearth among these barren crags match with an aged wife. I meet and dole unequal laws unto a savage race that hoard and sleep and feed and know not me. All these people do is they get the laws read to them. I mean, I'm the person who is over this land, but they don't know what I've done or what I've accomplished. They don't realize that it must be like how the kids felt in Narnia. Every time they show back up to England, they're like, nobody knows who I am. I'm like royalty in this other world. This sucks.
It's actually explained at the start of the second movie with Caspian, right?
Yeah.
Caspian, because they're getting fights and everything, and he's like, well, I was a king. Well, not in this world.
Yeah, I do remember that. That was. I've always found that. I was like, yeah, that nobody knows who they are. I matter somewhere. He says, I cannot rest from travel. I will drink life to the lees. All times I have enjoyed greatly, have suffered greatly, both with those that love me and alone on shore, and when through scudding drifts the rainy Hyades vex the dim sea, I am become a name. It's such great lines here. I am become a name. People know my name. I exist more so as a name than I do as myself. For always roaming with a hungry heart, much have I seen and known. Cities of men and manners, climates, councils, governments, myself not least, but honored of them all. And drunk delight of battle with my peers far on the ringing plains of windy Troy. I'm a part of all that I have met. That's a great way of saying I am made up of my experiences. Yet all experience is an arch where through gleams that untraveled world whose margin fades forever and forever when I move. How dull it is to pause, to make an end, to rust unburnished, not to shine in use. Like, like just to get old and die. He doesn't want to do that. As though to breathe were life. Life piled on life were all too little, and of one to me little remains. But every hour is saved from that eternal silence. Something more. A bringer of new things, and violet were for some 3 suns to store and hoard myself, and this gray spirit yearning and desire to follow knowledge like a sinking star. Beyond the utmost bound of human thought, this, and this is a new stanza in our book, this is my son, mine own Telemachus, to whom I leave the scepter and the isle well loved to me, discerning to fulfill this labor, by slow prudence to make mild a rugged people, and through soft degrees subdue them to the useful and to the good. Most blameless is he, centered in the sphere of common duties, decent not to fail in offices of tenderness, and pay me adoration to my household gods when I am gone. He works his work, I am mine. So he's basically praising his son for a second. He says, he can do this kind of work. He can do this, like, keeping the peace kind of work. Okay, I trust him. And then he quickly moves on to his final point that he finishes. He points out to sea and he says, there lies the port. The vessel puffs her sail, there gloom the dark broad seas. My mariners, souls that have toiled and wrought and thought with me, that ever with a frolic welcome took the thunder and the sunshine and opposed free hearts, free foreheads. You and I are olds. Old age hath yet his honor and his toil. Death closes all, but something ere the end, some work of noble note may yet be done. Not unbecoming men that strove with gods. The lights begin to twinkle from the rocks. The long day wanes. The slow moon climbs. The deep moans round with many voices. Come, my friends. 'Tis not too late to seek a newer world. Push off, and sitting well in order smite the sounding furrows. For my purpose holds to sail beyond the sunset and the baths of all the western stars until I die. It may be that gulfs will wash us down. It may be we shall touch the happy isles and see the great Achilles, whom we knew. Though much is taken, much abides. And though we are not now that strength which in old days moved earth and heaven, that which we are, we are. One equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. It really is like, probably if you're ever going to be like old and tell a speech to somebody about how you're not that old anymore, just go find this. Like, I can do stuff. I still can do stuff. We should do stuff. You know? You don't know. You're young. You don't have the sense of you're an immortal body yet. Sometimes I wonder if everybody, like, if all youth actually think that they're immortal, truly inside. They're like, I'm the one. The whole world was built for me.
No. I'm kind of expecting that I died before.
Like there's a camera watching me somewhere. Okay. So, let's go get some exams. I'll bring them back.
Fingers crossed.